whatever happened to Tim Burton's Batman franchise. It went awry so quickly. Remember when it started? It was glorious. Michael Keaton was so good as Batman. Nicholson was born to play the Joker. And then it got better. 3 years later, Batman Returns came out. Sure, there were some people who complained that at the time it was deemed too dark. But looking back, Michelle Pfeiffer was maybe the best of any of the villains from that era. DeVito put a spin on Penguin that is remembered to this day. It's still reflected in the current comic books. Penguin is not the little fat guy with a bow tie. He's more of a freak. And then Burton left. Oh, I tried. I tried with Batman Forever. Jim Carrey wasn't horrible. But Tommy Lee Jones and Val Kilmer. It was like watching a plank of wood wearing a Batman cowl. And then Schwarzenegger. Uma Thurman. But all worked out in the end. A decade passed almost without any Batman movies, and then in 2005, Batman Begins came out. God bless Christopher Nolan. Oh, I know there are some people who have their problems with Nolan now, but do you remember what he inherited? It's like blaming Obama for the economy. I mean, subject for another day. Batman Begins was and is the definitive reboot ever. The reboot that had to happen, that had to happen. And it worked. It worked so wonderfully well. Oh, it wasn't perfect. I mean, I'll agree with you, comic book cast. The fight scenes aren't great. And, yeah, there's a lot of deviation from comic book lore. But compared to what came before, compared to Schumacher, Christopher Nolan was a goddamn model of virtue sticking to comic book lore compared to that asshole. Batman Begins is not a perfect movie, but because it took Batman seriously, because it took Batman back from Hollywood, because it made a Batman movie that focused on Bruce Wayne, that focused on Batman for once. This is a 5-star movie. This is one of the best comic book movies of all time. And yes, there are problems. And the biggest problem maybe is the villains are a little weak. Not that the choice of villains is stupendous. Who would have ever thought we would get Ra's al Ghul as a villain? Who would have ever thought we would finally get Scarecrow as a villain? But Scarecrow was barely in it, and Ra's al Ghul in the end. I mean, I'll give Nolan credit only with Ra's al Ghul in that he chose the good right villain to start with, a mentor for Bruce Wayne. It made it more personal. He got a great actor to play Ra's al Ghul and Liam Neeson, and um, it he deviated from comic book lore, but at the same time, here's the thing, and here's where I will make my argument for Christopher Nolan and why he should have deviated from comic book lore. We'd had 4 movies that were borderline science fiction films. I mean, I would say, the having a chemical that could, put a grin on your face, or and penguins that were under mind control, and the Riddler's TV device thing that beamed a signal into your head, and Mr. Freeze and Poison Ivy, who pretty much are straight up science fiction villains. Um, it was right to try something different. It was right to try and make a Batman movie that was realistic. Because Batman, as a hero, is one of the more realistic heroes. And so, taking away the Lazarus Pit from Ra's al Ghul, making him a terrorist, really was fitting, and I think it was the right choice. And later on down the line, there'll be reboot after reboot after reboot of Batman. They can bring in the Lazarus Pit, and all the science fiction elements can come back. For this one franchise, though, it was going for something different, and I think because we are living in a world where reboots are going to happen forever. I mean, can you imagine a time when Batman won't be around? I can't. I don't want to. Uh, And so I would like to see reboot after, not every. I hear that they're going to reboot Batman in like 2015 to get another Batman movie out. That I'm not for. I think a decade and a half at least should pass. But there's. I would like to see all different kinds of Batman films, and this Batman Begins is a Batman film that has its feet as close to reality as possible. Christian Bale, not my favorite Batman. I think Michael Keaton is a better Batman, but Christian Bale, realistic Batman. Um, I think the cast is stellar. I mean, Gary Oldman, in particular, as Commissioner Gordon, well, not Commissioner Gordon in this, but Lieutenant Gordon, is one of the great comic book performances in a supporting role. He finally takes that character who is so rich in the comic books and makes him rich on film. Pat Hingle in the other Batman movies, he was a serviceable Gordon, but he was not. You could have been anybody playing that role, and it would have been no different. There was nothing to that Commissioner Gordon. Cillian Murphy is the Scarecrow, again, not enough screen time, but he does a really good job playing Dr. Jonathan Crane. Michael Caine is Alfred. A little weird to have a Cockney Alfred, but it's Michael Caine. So, and I mean, it's a great cast, and while the fight scenes, aren't great, I think that like the chase sequence with the tumbler was really good. You got another great supporting role for Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox, a character who's never been brought into the live action films. I think that was great. Batman Begins is a solid movie. And I included it on my 100 favorite movies list over the Tim Burton movies because the Tim Burton movies were very disjointed. By Tim Burton, of course, I only mean Batman and Batman Returns. There wasn't really a through line to the story. It was sort of, okay, we're going to have a different love interest. It was sort of like they were setting up a James Bond kind of thing. Different love interest every time, different story every time. Referencing the last movie as little as possible. So it wasn't like it was a continuation. It was like It's just a sequel. It's just part two. Um, what raises Batman Begins above that is The Dark Knight. And I know there's going to be a discussion about The Dark Knight on the board, but Dark Knight, come on, honestly, it's a 10. It's a great film. It's a great, 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 great film. Again, are there problems with it? Yes. It's not perfect, but then again, I wouldn't say any movie is. Um, Batman Begins picked up where, or Dark Knight picks up where Batman Begins left off, making it a true continuation. You kind of have to see Batman Begins to really fully understand Dark Knight, as it kind of should be. I like that. I like that they were setting up a story over multiple films. Um, and I like that Christian Bale is still the main character. Batman is still the main character. In fact, if there is, for all the talk about Heath Ledger as the Joker, who steals the show undeniably, um, Gary Oldman still is really, he's as much a hero in this movie as Batman is. And that to me is how it should be. I like the partnership between Batman and Gordon being fully explored. Um, we get a switch up in the casting because we no longer have Katie Holmes playing Rachel Dawes. We have Maggie Gyllenhaal. And I just don't like when they do that. So I would have preferred Katie Holmes. Maggie Gyllenhaal is a better actress, but it's weird. She's all right. Guy time here. All right. Maggie Gyllenhaal's hot. Maggie Gyllenhaal is hot. Okay. But not in this movie. What happened to Maggie Gyllenhaal in this movie? She is they're just sort of butt ugly in this movie, and I'm sorry. I don't mean to be offensive to anybody, but she is not attractive in this movie. Katie Holmes, while I always looked at her and I thought, she's an assistant district attorney, and she looks like she's about 20. I thought that was unrealistic. Um, I would have preferred Katie Holmes to return. I think she could have grown into the role a little bit more. Maggie Gyllenhaal, her performance isn't bad, but I don't know. I like I said, I don't like it when they switch up actors, even if the new actor is better. I just don't like it, and especially if it's a continuation. If it was like um, a disjointed sort of thing, if it was like the Tim Burton movies and they just recast somebody in the role of, let's say, Commissioner Gordon, who didn't have much to do in the first movie anyway, that's not so bad. But when it's a continuation from the last film, I like to see actors grow into their characters and develop their characters further. Um, Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent redeems the character of Two-Face for film after whatever the hell that was that Tommy Lee Jones did. Uh, and again, I mean, it's just all the Morgan Freeman's back and Michael Caine is back, and they're developing their characters further. And this is an epic film. A little too epic for its own good, admittedly. I think they could have shaved like 15 minutes off of this movie and it would have been way better. Because it does get to be a little bit. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for here? Long. It's a little too long. It feels like it's over when they capture the Joker, and then you've got like another 45 minutes to the movie. So, I mean, if they had taken the whole Hong Kong thing out, which I didn't feel added anything to the plot, you could have literally cut that entire bit out and just shown Batman capturing the crooked accountant, and it would have been the same thing. All the Hong Kong thing did was allow for that spectacular IMAX, jumping sequence. Um, And I don't think that's a reason to include something in a movie just for the spectacle. And that to me was the only time Dark Knight really fell into that trap, where it was about the spectacle. A word about Heath Ledger. I know that there's an argument going on that if Heath Ledger hadn't died, Dark Knight would have never been a big hit movie. And undeniably, I will admit there was probably some people who were curious about it and who learned about it because of Heath Ledger's death. I think it would have made, if anything, it would have lost, a couple $100 at the box office at the most. People don't go to see a movie because an actor died. Um, there's that movie coming out later this summer that has Whitney Houston in it. I don't think it's going to make $1 billion because Whitney Houston died. Heath Ledger died. He wasn't really a huge box office draw. I mean, Brokeback Mountain was really the only movie he was really, really well known for. I don't think anybody really would have. Nobody said, hey, let's go see Dark Knight because Heath Ledger died. It gave the movie a lot of free publicity, but that's it. I think that his performance as the Joker was brilliant. I think he deserved that Oscar. I think he would have gotten it one way or the other. His performance as the Joker is iconic now. It's one of the reasons why I don't. Whenever anybody says they shouldn't redo Khan in Star Trek, or they shouldn't redo, they should never, they're doing this Hannibal Lecter show. They should not do a Hannibal Lecter show because nobody will ever top Anthony Hopkins. Going into The Dark Knight, I thought nobody was ever going to top Jack Nicholson as the Joker. Heath Ledger buries Nicholson in the fucking in a grave. I mean, the Nicholson performance, and I'm not taking anything away from it, but Nicholson was playing Nicholson. They put clown makeup on Jack and said, okay, just go ahead and play the part the way you play any part. Heath Ledger gives a dark, twisted performance as the Joker. That absolutely deserves to be up there with Hannibal Lecter, with Harry Lime, with the great, great movie villains of all time. Norman Bates, and I mean, Joker from Dark Knight deserves to be up there as with Darth Vader. I mean, it's that good. It's that iconic a performance, and I do not envy the next actor who has to play the Joker. But it goes to show that even an iconic performance can be bested. So really, I mean, of course I'm reviewing these now because Dark Knight Rises comes out next month or next week. But I wanted to do this because it is also there's a little bit of hate for the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. I know even on this site, like you said, Comic Book Cast doesn't particularly like them, and I get it because really these movies are no fun to watch. They're no fun. They're like they get compared to movies like Heat and Godfather for a good reason. Heat and Godfather are no fun to watch either. They're iconic films. They're great films, but it's not like you're sitting there with a big grin on your face. Like with The Avengers was the crowd pleaser. The Avengers, I remember I was watching The Avengers and I remember just being like, and that's not what Dark Knight or Batman Begins is. It's not what Dark Knight Rises is going to be. The Dark Knight trilogy is about realism, or as close to realism as a guy dressed as a bat can get, and in that regard, I think it was a noble effort by Nolan. I think he did what a lot of people felt was impossible, which he took a dead franchise that had been beaten with the stupid stick, and he brought it back to life. And for that, we all owe him a debt of gratitude. Even if we're not huge Dark Knight fans, we owe him a debt of gratitude. These are two great movies. I love the Batman movies by Nolan. Yeah, he forgot really the comic book aspect of it, but I don't think every comic book movie should have to be a comic book movie. Okay? Marvel does comic book movies and does them well. Does them well. Spider-Man, X-Men, Captain America, Avengers, they were all comic book movies. Um, I think what DC does, and I think rightfully to do it differently than Marvel, DC makes giant, epic films that really go for like the gold in a lot of ways, being like just great films. I mean, if you look back, that's always been the case. Superman, the first Superman is, and the second Superman are sort of iconic films. The first two Tim Burton Batman movies are iconic films. Batman and The Dark Knight are iconic films. Granted, they do have missteps. God only knows what they were thinking, making a Jonah Hex movie and screwing it up. And even though I liked Green Lantern, I could at least admit it wasn't as good as it could have been. It could have been way better. It could have been the Star Wars of our time, and it wasn't. Um, and so, the question is, can they make a great, iconic movie out of something other than Superman or Batman? And really, they haven't even made a Superman movie that everybody's agreed on since 1980, one, when Superman 2 came out. Because I like Superman Returns, but I know I'm in the minority. Um, but at the same, so really, it's Batman. They've got Batman going for them, and I hope that now that Dark Knight Rises is coming out, that they will focus on other DC characters. Um, but really, this trilogy is, and I'll be doing a Dark Knight Rises review next week. I think this trilogy is the best representation of Batman in live action because it goes for something so utterly different than what anyone expected it to, and did it so well that even though Tim Burton managed to bring a lot more fun into the franchise, and admittedly, they're neck and neck for me. I think that Nolan and Burton, their visions are so close in, and really, if Dark Knight Rises sucks, I might come back next week and say I take back my Nolan spot in my top 100, and I'm putting Tim Burton in, because really the deciding factor was that this was a trilogy with a story arc that covered the whole series, um, whereas Burton only had the two movies and they were kind of disjointed and didn't really fit together perfectly. Um, but I don't doubt that Dark Knight Rises is going to be great. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to go see it opening night, and I'll be giving you guys a review on Monday. Um, you've all seen Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. You all have your opinion. Let the arguing begin on if I'm right or if I'm wrong. But if you haven't seen them, you must. They are great films. Do not go see Dark Knight Rises without seeing these two movies first. And let's all at least tip our hat to Christopher Nolan for saving Batman from development hell. He really did resuscitate a corpse.